Hi, my little chickadees, grandkids, and Janet, Emily. I hope you're having fun learning how to read the Bible and learning some more about Jesus. And we were talking about how Jesus is the light of the world last week, how it started off in John 1:1. And then we read about Jesus being the light in John 8. And then I put you over in Matthew, John, about Jesus being the light of the world and how we're supposed to be the light. And then the coolest thing happens today in John 9 when Jesus is going to heal a blind man. And of course, if you're blind, you're in the dark. So Jesus demonstrates being the light of the world. Isn't that awesome? But this is one of the craziest stories ever. And so I'm just going to read it. And you guys read it with me too, okay? Okay, starting in verse 1. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been born from birth. In other words, he was born blind. Rabbi, that means teacher, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? No, it was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the tasks assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work, but while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. Then he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. Siloam means sent. So the man went and washed, and guess what? He came back seeing. You know, Jesus heals in lots and lots of different ways, and I think he's just showing us that you have to listen to God so that you know what to do. And sometimes he would just say, go, your son's been healed. And sometimes he would touch people, and sometimes he would just say, be healed. But in this case, he actually made mud out of spit and dirt on the ground, put it on his eyes, and told him to go wash his face. Because he knew that, I guess, that man needed to do something. And that was the way that God told him to heal him. So anyway, he came back seeing. Don't you know he was yelling and hollering, and all of his friends were so excited? Look at what they said in verse 8. His neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, it just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I am the same one. They asked, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and washed, and now I can see. Where is he now? They asked. I don't know, he replied. Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees. Now remember, the Pharisees had been wanting to kill Jesus because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. And of course, the Pharisees had their rules about the Sabbath day, remember? The Pharisees asked the man all about it, so he told them, he put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man Jesus is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath. Others said, but how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was a deep division of opinion among them. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what's your opinion about this man who healed you? The man replied, I think he must be a prophet. The Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see, so they called in his parents. They asked them, is this your son? Was he born blind? If so, how can he now see? His parents replied, we know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him, he's old enough to speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue, which means they'd been kicked out of the church, so to speak. That's why they said, "He's old enough, ask him." So for the second time, they called in the man who had been blind and told him, "God should get the glory for this because we know this man, Jesus, is a sinner." Now, did you realize they knew that God should get the glory for a miracle, but they didn't realize that Jesus is God. Remember our John 1:1 verse? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jesus is God. And so in verse 25, this is what the man said. He said, "I don't know whether he is a sinner," the man replied, "but I know this, I was blind, and now I can see." They just didn't get it, did they? They said, "But what did he do?" They asked. "How did he heal you?" "Look," the man exclaimed, "I told you once. Didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they cursed him and said, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from." The man said, "What? That's very strange," the man replied. "He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from? We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done it." Wasn't that man smart? He figured it out, didn't he? "You were born a total sinner," they answered. "Are you trying to teach us?" And they threw him out of the synagogue. He was no longer a sinner. He was already beginning to believe in Jesus, wasn't he? Now this is what's really cool. Look in verse 35. When Jesus heard what happened, he went and found the man and asked, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man answered, "Who is he, sir? I want to believe in him." See, he didn't really understand. "You've seen him," Jesus said, "and he is speaking to you." In other words, I am the Son of Man. I am God, the Messiah. "Yes, Lord, I believe," the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. Then Jesus told him, "I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind." In other words, the Pharisees thought they could see. They thought they were smart and they could understand everything. But they were really blind, weren't they? Because they couldn't see that Jesus was actually God. Jesus was the Messiah right there. Some Pharisees were standing nearby, heard him, and asked, "Are you saying we're blind?" And Jesus said, "If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty," Jesus replied. "But you remain guilty because you claim you can see." But they were blind. They couldn't see. But Jesus is the light of the world, and he gives sight to the blind. Physically, he heals people, but also spiritually, he saves people so that they can come to the light. Isn't this a great story? Wouldn't you love to have been there? We'd been a hooping and a hollering, wouldn't we? And just think, if you were the man born blind, wouldn't that be the most wonderful day? And Jesus wants us to learn how to lay hands on the sick too. And so, wow, wouldn't that be exciting to see people's eyes open up when we laid hands on them and prayed? But you know, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he still wants to heal people. I love you guys. I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope you remember how much God loves you and how much MiMa Jane or Aunt Jane loves you guys so much. God bless. Love on somebody today. Bye.